Your name's on it as producer. There are so many connections in here. How significant were you in getting this project off the ground?
Well, I initially had the idea when I was hired to read the audiobook for recording, and that was, I think, about 8 years ago or 9 years ago. And so it was my inspiration that saw it as a movie, or at least I was the one that acted on my idea that it would be a good movie. And so I bought the rights and I took it to Julian Fellowes, who not only seemed like the ideal screenwriter for it, because he's a guy that's obsessed with history and character and a great storyteller and all those things, but I also happened to be working and standing next to him as I was reading it, so it was really easy for me to just hand it to him. And he really liked the idea. And the rest, as they say, is history. Years and years and years of struggle, and that old story where everyone tells you it is impossible, you can never get this done, it's too difficult to shoot period in New York for the budget that you can see a return on, and all these reasons not to make it. But we just kept going, and the little engine kept chugging on the project, and so here we sit. It's actually done, and it's out today.
There's something to be said for perseverance in this industry, isn't there?
Indeed. I don't think people really realize that it's 99% of it is just a great hunger to do something, that and a real resilience to the word no.
Yeah. Tell me, working with Fellowes, he's such a good writer. He's also a good director, because I really liked the film he made too.
I did too. Loved it.
It just got not noticed very much.
Yeah.
And it deserved more, I thought. He's such a good writer. You really were lucky in getting him on board.
Absolutely.
What's he like to work with?
Well, it was interesting for me because my relationship before we started on the Chaperone had been very much a relationship of he writes, I act. We'd worked together on Downton Abbey for, I think, about a year before I brought this project to him. And so I had to kind of work up my courage to give him feedback on various drafts, or have a discussion in which I presented my ideas about the interpretation of the material. And I found him to be really open and very amenable and very flexible, but strong as well when it came to things that he felt strongly about. So it was a really completely enjoyable experience. There was no agony to it whatsoever. The agony came with later, when it was very difficult to finance and to shoot. But the process of creating the script was a really easy one.
And interesting too, because it's very, very nice material. Tell me, Michael Engler, now another Downton Abbey connection. You must have worked with a zillion directors over the years.
Yeah. How
come he was chosen?
For a couple of reasons. One of them was that I wanted somebody for whom it was a real opportunity, because it was not going to be an easy project to shoot. Most people that I took it to really told me, this is never going to work. You don't have enough money to do this properly. And so they wouldn't have touched it with a 10-foot pole. But Michael also has such a wonderful aesthetic that I thought was absolutely right for the story. He knows how to shoot very quickly on the streets of New York, because he's done so much work there and he lives there. And I knew that he also loved the writing of Julian and was very good at working within that framework. He just, having had experience on the series, so there were all these factors that came into play to make him seem like the perfect person. And now that we've done it, I just cannot imagine anybody else pulling it off the way he did.
Now, were you involved in all of those decisions as producer, choosing the director, casting?
I was. Choosing the director was really because there was no one else around at the time. We were still struggling to get it set up. So that was my decision. And then the casting process was a discussion amongst a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people like to participate in that, particularly financiers, because, as you probably know, they're always looking for marquee names. So we had to go through a lot of conversations about people like Tom Hanks being in it and things like that, because that is, what they try to do. As much as I'd be thrilled to be in a project with Tom Hanks, you have to kind of have this conversation that isn't realistic, and then you kind of wait patiently until there is a more realistic conversation that you have about actors that actually are likely to do the roles. And fortunately for me, we would go through all these not only unrealistic but not really appropriate names for all the parts, every single one. And I would be on my hands and knees praying that I don't know, Tom Cruise would turn us down, because I would know that it would really destroy the movie. But you need it for your foreign money. But in the end, it ended up exactly the way that in my wildest dreams I would have wished for. This dream cast. They're all, in my taste, they're all just perfect for their parts.
She's extraordinary, Hayley.
Yeah, she really is.
And you spend a lot of screen time
Yeah.
with her as well.
Yeah.
Was that a pleasant experience?
Yeah, it was. I mean, she threw herself into it, and she had such a long journey to go, because she is not someone that's had a lot of experience playing very far from herself. She hasn't done period pieces very much of the time. So it was a real act of courage on her part. She really threw herself into it 100%. And she already had the dancing behind her. Her background is dance. So in that area, she was totally comfortable and was fantastic. But the rest of the stuff, she worked very hard and very quickly, and it was phenomenal to watch. It was just such a pleasure.
Now, tell me, just thematically, because it's really your journey, Norman's journey through the film. What was it about thematically that attracted you to this story?
I thought that it would be so wonderful for a change to see the growth in a woman in her middle age. I mean, you're always seeing it in the younger characters or the man. The man is going on an adventure and learning something, coming to some kind of insight. It's a story that's told in different incarnations over and over again, but it's very, very rarely the older woman, the middle-aged woman in the middle of her life, who is really rendered totally disappears. I mean, she just disappears from books. She disappears from TV screens. She disappears from the movie screens. She disappears from the world of music to a large extent. So I don't think we're disappearing from life. We're still around. We're still kicking. We're still living. And so I thought it was right to tell a story about that person, that ordinary woman who is growing and finding herself. And she just happens to be in her 50s when she does it.
I just also thought it was, so compassionate as well, the character giving back.
Yeah.
At the end of the film.
Yeah.
That's a nice
word to use. I love that word. I mean, I feel that word applies to the film generally. And I also find that that's lacking in a lot of the TV and the film I see. There's something very nasty about contemporary culture. So many of the TV shows and movies are looking for this kind of edge where the characters are all despicable to one degree or another. And I don't really find that very inspiring. I mean, I know it's out there, and it's around us so much of the time in the paper and the stories we read and the things you see on TV in terms of like the news, that for me, a movie in which we can escape all that and see characters that are really good people that are trying to do their best and that operate with love. And, they're not perfect and they don't always get along, but their intentions are good. And so I find that to be something refreshing, and I hope that other people will feel the same.
The costumes in it
Yeah.
are absolutely to die for.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know how you got onto that costume designer, but she's really brilliant.
I completely agree. She not only has such an eye for elegance and authenticity, she would always find some really beautiful original piece of fabric. She would go into our own closet and get a lot of those fantastic hats. She would just sort of rummage through her own things and pull out this amazing piece. I think she happens to be obsessed with the 20s, as it turns out.
That was handy.
But she also has this ability to suggest character in a way that I don't think is always true of costume designers. I mean, they're usually very good at making things look pretty, but at the very beginning, we had this conversation, and I said, I really want Norma to be a bit gauche, as contrasted to the very sophisticated Louise, who's always wrong-footing her in every situation. And I really think she managed to do that in a very subtle way with the character of Norma. Like, you can almost see the hay coming out of her ears in some scenes with the big hat. And when she goes into the speakeasy and she's in this really kind of homespun, homemade-looking dress with the janitor who looks like her perfect man in his homemade-looking clothes, and everybody else is so chic and glamorous, and she just got it just right. And everybody still looks pretty elegant and all that. So I think she deserves a lot of credit.
Now, just one more question. Just the whole inspired by a true story. Where's the true story in this, apart from Louise Brooks going? And the dance studio was not in New York, was it?
Oh, yes, it was.
Was it?
Yeah, there is a real seminal dance company. Louise really did travel from Wichita at the age of 15, and she really did study with them. I mean, this is all very interesting because we know a historical fact. Louise Brooks traveled with an unknown middle-aged neighbor. Why? She traveled with a neighbor we don't know. What that neighbor wanted to do in New York, we don't know. We don't know what their relationship was like, but we know they traveled to New York together. Fact, Louise did study with the Denishon Dance Company. In fact, a very interesting thing is that she studied with this Denishon Dance Training Company. Then she danced with them alongside Martha Graham, who trained Paul Taylor, who trained Twyla Tharp, who trained the man that has choreographed our dances. So I love that. There's a sort of 6-degree separation between these dancers, but that's all true. And we also know that at the end of her career, when she was in her mid-30s and she'd hit rock bottom, Louise did go back and she did live in her mother's house for a couple of years back in Wichita, Kansas, and she was in a darkened room drinking the day away most of the time. And she did have this fiasco with a dance school that she tried to open there. And she did finally pull herself together and go back to New York. And she did have a kind of second act to her life as a writer who wrote about her time in Hollywood. So every fact about Louise is really true. But the Norma stuff is fiction. Because we nobody knows anything about that woman, so we thought we could just, Laura Moriarty, who wrote the book, felt at liberty to make up what she wanted to make up about that character.
Well, it's a very satisfying ending, isn't it? With all of you
thank you.
ensconced together.
Yes.
Very romantic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
Oh, thank you. Well, the feeling is mutual. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.